A poisoned vial, hidden in the shadows of Willow Creek, threatens to silence Cedar Hollow's heart, and only a girl and her aging beagle can stop it. Welcome to the Dog Stories 4.0, where 17-year-old Ellie Thompson and her faithful tracker face a chilling new threat from Streampulse, biotech's toxic plot. Feel their unbreakable bond pulse as they unearth a deadly chemical secret in the creek's mud, sparking a firestorm that erupts in a heart-pounding town hall showdown. From a sinister package left at dawn to trackers' defiant bark rallying a valley's courage, every moment surges toward a climax where love battles greed. Can Ellie and Tracker save their town's lifeblood, or will Lydia Voss's biotech empire drown their hope? Subscribe to the Dog Stories 4.0 to join our pack and dive into this gripping saga of loyalty, legacy, and triumph. Step now into the moonlit mist of Willow Creek, where the water sings truths only a dog can hear, and a girl's heart shines brighter than any darkness.
The Dog Stories 4.0.
Tracker's not just a dog. Ellie, he's the only thing left that can prove your dad didn't die for nothing, Amos Reed said, his voice rough as gravel, cutting through the hum of the Cedar Hollow Harvest Fair. Ellie Thompson, 9 years old and silent as a shadow, stood frozen on the gravel path, her small hands clutching a dented tin box. The words landed like a stone in her chest, heavy and sharp. Around her, the fair was a riot of life, golden cornstalks stacked high, the sweet tang of apple cider on the breeze, fiddles whining from a distant stage. Children laughed, chasing each other through hay bales, while old-timers swapped stories over mugs of steaming coffee. But to Ellie, it was all noise, a storm too big for the quiet she carried inside. She hadn't spoken a word since last spring, when her father, Caleb Thompson, didn't come home. His truck had skidded off the road near the town dam, the papers said. An accident. But Ellie knew better. She'd seen the worry in his eyes when he talked about AgriSynth Solutions, the company poisoning their water, their land, their home. The September sun hung low, painting the fairgrounds in hues of amber and rust. Ellie's sneakers crunched as she moved toward the main tent, where a handmade sign read, "Retired Environmental K9 Auction." Her tin box held $47.82, chore money, birthday nickels, a few crumpled dollar bills from selling lemonade last summer. It was all she had, but it was for Tracker, the beagle who'd been her dad's partner, his shadow, his truth finder. For months, she'd snuck out to the old ranger station at dusk, whispering to Tracker through the chain-link fence. She told him secrets, how she missed her dad's laugh, how she still waited for his boots to thump on the porch, how the silence in her throat felt like drowning. Tracker never answered, but his warm nose pressed against her palm, his amber eyes steady, listening. That was enough. "Ellie, honey, we should go home," Laura Thompson said, her voice soft but frayed, like a quilt worn thin. Ellie's mother stood behind her, blonde hair tied back, hands twisting in her cardigan. Her eyes, once bright, were dulled by grief and the weight of keeping their small family together. Tom Bennett, Ellie's stepdad, hovered nearby, jingling his truck keys, his broad shoulders slouched. "Let's not make this harder, kid," he said, his tone practical but tinged with discomfort. Tom was a good man, a mechanic who fixed things carburetors, leaky pipes, but he didn't know how to fix a girl who'd stopped talking, a girl whose world had cracked open when her dad's truck sank into the river. Ellie ignored them, her gaze fixed on the tent. The air smelled of hay and caramel apples, but beneath it was something sharper: sweat, anticipation, the faint chemical tang of the fairground's old soil. She slipped inside, the canvas flaps brushing her shoulders, and the world dimmed to a warm, filtered glow. Wooden benches were packed with locals, farmers in flannel, grandmothers with quilted bags, kids clutching cotton candy. At the front, a small stage held a metal crate, and inside sat Tracker. His white and brown coat was flecked with gray at the muzzle, his long ears drooped, but his eyes, bright, liquid amber, found Ellie's in an instant. Her breath caught, a spark igniting in her chest, like the air before a lightning strike. Tracker's tail thumped once, soft but deliberate, as if saying, "I see you, Ellie. I'm still here." The auctioneer, a wiry man in a checkered shirt, clapped his hands. "Folks, we've got a special lot today." Tracker, a beagle trained by Caleb Thompson himself, retired after 5 years sniffing out trouble for our environment. "Let's start the bidding at $300. The crowd murmured, heads turning, whispers of Caleb's name floating like ghosts. Everyone knew him, the quiet man who'd fought for clean water, who'd walked these fields with Tracker at his side, sniffing for chemicals AgriSynth swore didn't exist. Everyone knew he was gone, too, and the hole he'd left in Cedar Hollow. Ellie's heart thudded, her fingers tightening around the tin box. She scanned the crowd, spotting 2 men who didn't belong. In the front row, Roland Carver, AgriSynth's executive, sat with a slick smile, his silver hair gleaming under the tense lights. His suit was too crisp for a fair, his gold watch catching the sun. He raised a hand, voice smooth as oil, $1,000. Across the aisle, Amos Reed, a farmer with a face carved by sun and sorrow, leaned forward, knuckles white. $1,500, he growled, his eyes flicking to Ellie, heavy with something unspoken, grief, maybe, or guilt. Amos's son, Jacob, had died 2 years ago, another accident tied to AgriSynth. Ellie didn't know the details, but she felt the weight of it in Amos's stare. The bids climbed fast, $2,000, $2,500, $3,000, Roland's cold confidence sparring with Amos's stubborn grit. Ellie's coins felt like pebbles now, useless against the numbers flying like bullets. Her chest tightened, the air thick with the crowd's murmurs and the faint creak of the tent. Laura touched her shoulder, whispering, "It's okay, baby." But it wasn't. Tracker wasn't just a dog. He was her dad's laugh, his calloused hands tossing a stick, his voice saying, "Trust Tracker, Ellie. He knows." She stepped forward, legs trembling, and raised her tin box. $47.82, she whispered, her voice a ghost, barely breaking the din. The tent fell silent, a heartbeat of stillness. A few locals smiled, eyes soft with pity. An old woman in the back dabbed her eyes. But Roland smirked, a sharp, ugly thing, and the auctioneer shook his head, his voice gentle but final. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, that's not enough." Ellie's face burned, her hands shaking as she clutched the box. She wanted to scream, to run, to make them understand that Tracker wasn't just a lot number. He was her dad, her home, her voice. The crowd's pity stung worse than Roland's sneer. Tracker whined, a low, aching sound that seemed to pull the air from the tent. His paws scraped the crate, eyes locked on Ellie, pleading. Then, with a sudden lunge, he yanked at his leash, tipping the crate forward. The metal clanged against the stage, and the crowd gasped as Tracker broke free, bounding down the steps, his paws thumping the dirt floor. He skidded to a stop at Ellie's feet, his warm nose pressing into her hand, his body trembling but solid, like an anchor in a storm. Ellie dropped to her knees, burying her face in his fur, the scent of earth and dog filling her lungs. For a moment, the world shrank to just them, Ellie and Tracker, a girl and her dog, holding on to each other as the fair spun on outside. The tent erupted in chaos, whispers, shouts, a child's nervous laugh. Amos stood, his boots scraping the floor, voice rough but clear. That dog belongs with her. Caleb would have wanted it. You all know it. The crowd stirred, murmurs of agreement rising like a tide. Laura knelt beside Ellie, tears streaking her face. "You're so brave, baby," she whispered. Tom, usually silent, stepped forward, his voice unsteady but firm. "She's right. That dog's family. Even the auctioneer paused, his gavel hovering, eyes darting to the crowd for guidance. Roland shot to his feet, his smile gone, voice sharp as a blade. This is an auction, not a charity. Rules are rules. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing on Tracker, then Ellie, as if measuring something more than a dog. The air turned electric, heavy with unspoken secrets. Ellie felt it, the same chill she'd felt when her dad mentioned AgriSynth, his voice low and urgent. Tracker wasn't just a beagle. He was a key, a witness, the last piece of her dad's fight. And Roland wanted him gone. A memory flashed, her dad by the river, Tracker sniffing the bank, Caleb kneeling beside her. This guy's nose could find a needle in a haystack, he'd said, then softer, if anything happens, Ellie, trust Tracker. He knows. Now, with Tracker's warmth against her, Ellie understood. He knew where the truth was buried, and Roland feared it. The crowd's voices swelled, some calling for fairness, others for rules. Amos locked eyes with Ellie, a silent promise in his weathered face. Laura's hand tightened on her shoulder. Tom stood taller, and Tracker's tail thumped. Steady, sure. The auctioneer cleared his throat, voice hoarse. Folks, let's take a break. We'll sort this out. As the crowd spilled outside, buzzing with gossip, Ellie stayed kneeling in the dirt, Tracker's head heavy in her lap. The fair's fiddles played on, but inside the tent, something had shifted. Ellie felt it, a spark, small but fierce, like the first crack of dawn. She didn't know what came next, but with Tracker by her side, she wasn't alone. Not anymore. You think you can keep that dog and walk away, Laura? AgriSynth doesn't lose, Roland Carver hissed, his voice low and venomous, slicing through the dusk as his SUV idled outside the Thompson farmhouse. Ellie Thompson stood frozen on the porch, her small frame half hidden behind the screen door, Tracker's warm body pressed against her leg. The words landed like a slap, sharp and cold, as the last light of the Cedar Hollow sunset bled red across the cornfields. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke, but beneath it was a tension that made Ellie's skin prickle. Tracker's ears twitched, a low growl rumbling in his chest, his amber eyes fixed on the black SUV. For 9 years, Ellie had known this town as a safe place, crickets singing, neighbors waving from porches, but now, with Roland's threat hanging in the air, Cedar Hollow felt like a trap closing around her. Inside, Laura Thompson's hands trembled as she gripped the phone, her voice barely steady. Get off our property, Roland, or I'm calling the sheriff. Tom Bennett, Ellie's stepdad, stood at the window, a wrench clutched in his calloused hand, his jaw tight. You heard her, he said, stepping onto the porch. Leave. Roland's smile was a blade, his silver hair catching the fading light. He leaned out the SUV window, eyes sliding to Ellie and Tracker. You're making a mistake, he said, then nodded to his driver. The SUV rolled away, gravel crunching like bones under its tires, leaving a cloud of dust that lingered like a warning. Ellie's heart pounded, her fingers buried in Tracker's fur. The beagle's warmth grounded her, his steady breathing a reminder of her dad, Caleb, who'd taught Tracker to sniff out truth in the soil. She remembered his voice, low and urgent, on his last night. If anything happens, Ellie, trust Tracker. He knows. Now, with Roland's words echoing, she understood. Tracker wasn't just her dad's partner. He was a witness to AgriSynth's secrets, and Roland wanted him silenced. Laura pulled Ellie inside, locking the door. You okay, honey? She asked, kneeling to meet Ellie's eyes. Ellie nodded, her throat too tight to speak, the silence that had gripped her since Caleb's death still heavy. Tom paced, muttering, we can't fight a corporation. This is crazy. But Laura's face hardened. Caleb fought them. We owe him that much. Tracker nudged Ellie's hand, his nose warm and insistent, as if saying, we're in this together. For the first time in months, Ellie felt a spark of something, hope, maybe, or defiance, flickering beneath her fear. That night, Amos Reed arrived, his pickup rattling into the driveway, headlights cutting through the dark. The old farmer's boots scraped the porch, his weathered face shadowed under a worn hat. He carried a small leather journal, Caleb's, filled with tight handwriting and sketches of the town dam. Caleb was on to AgriSynth, Amos said, spreading the journal on the kitchen table, the air thick with the smell of coffee and old paper. They've been dumping chemicals for years, bribing officials to look the other way. My boy, Jacob, saw it too. He paid with his life. His voice cracked, and Ellie saw the same grief in his eyes that she carried in her chest. Laura's hands shook as she traced Caleb's notes, dates, chemical names, a map marked dam cache. He never told me how deep this went, she whispered. Tom frowned, skeptical. What's a dog got to do with it? Amos leaned forward, eyes fierce. Truckers trained to smell those chemicals. Caleb used him to find spill sites. That dog's the key to proving what AgriSynth did and what they're still hiding. Allie looked at Tracker, curled at her feet, his ears pricked. She remembered sneaking to the ranger station, whispering to him under the stars, how he listened when no one else could. He wasn't just a dog, he was her dad's last stand, and hers too. The next morning, before dawn, Amos led them to the dam. Mist clung to the riverbank, the air sharp with the scent of wet grass and clay. Tracker, off his leash, trotted ahead, nose to the ground, tail wagging like a metronome. Ellie followed, her sneakers sinking into the mud, Laura and Tom trailing behind, their faces tense. This is where Caleb marked it, Amos said, pointing to a gnarled oak by the water's edge. Tracker stopped, pawing furiously at the roots, dirt flying. Ellie knelt beside him, her small hands digging, heart racing. Her fingers hit metal, a rusted box, heavy and cold. Amos pried it open with a knife, revealing 3 glass vials filled with clear liquid, each labeled with a date and number and a USB drive marked AgriSynth evidence. Laura gasped, tears welling. He risked everything for this. Tom, his skepticism cracking, took the USB, his voice low. Emails, payments to council members. Caleb caught them red-handed. Tracker sat back, nose twitching, eyes on Ellie as if saying, "We found it." She stroked his ears, feeling her dad in the beagle's steady gaze, his courage woven into every thump of Tracker's tail. But the victory was fleeting. Headlights flashed in the distance, a vehicle slowing on the road above. "We need to move," Amos said, voice grim. "Roland's men are watching." Back at the farmhouse, the air was thick with fear and resolve. Clara Hayes, a councilwoman with gray hair and a voice like warm honey, arrived at dusk, her old station wagon crunching up the drive. "The council's meeting tomorrow," she said, sitting at the kitchen table, the journal and vials between them. "Bring Tracker, the evidence, everything. Make it public. They can't ignore the whole town." Laura nodded, her hands steady now. "We'll do it for Caleb." Tom, his broad shoulders squaring, met Ellie's eyes. "I was wrong, kid. I thought we could move on, but your dad, he was right to fight. I'm in this now." Ellie's chest warmed, and for the first time, she leaned into his side, just a little, feeling the weight of family shift. Amos spoke softly, his gaze distant. "My Jacob took photos of their barrels before he died. I lost him, but you, Ellie, you and Tracker can finish what he and Caleb started." Ellie clutched the journal, her fingers tracing her dad's words, "Trust Tracker. The truth is buried." She looked at Tracker, sprawled by the hearth, his ears flopping, and whispered, "We'll make Dad proud." His tail thumped, a promise sealed in the quiet. The council meeting dawned crisp and tense, the town hall packed with Cedar Hollow's heart, farmers in overalls, teachers with notepads, the fair's fiddler tapping his foot in the back. The room smelled of polished wood and nervous sweat, sunlight streaming through tall windows, casting shadows on the metal chairs. Ellie sat in the front row, Tracker at her feet, his head resting on her knee, his heartbeat steady against her trembling hands. Laura clutched the tote bag with the journal, Biles, and USB, her face pale but fierce. Tom sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, no longer the outsider. Amos, hat in hand, stood like a sentinel, his eyes scanning the crowd. Clara Hayes took her place at the council dais, her nod to Ellie a spark of hope. The council president, a weary man named Harold Tate, banged his gavel. "We're here to address the petition regarding K9 Tracker and allegations against Averyson Solutions. Mrs. Thompson, you may speak." Laura stood, her voice shaking at first, then gaining strength. "My husband, Caleb, died protecting our water. Tracker was his partner, trained to find the chemicals Agrisynth dumped. He belongs with my daughter, Ellie, and this evidence, his notes, these vials proves they've been poisoning our town for years." She held up the journal, her hands steady now, and the crowd leaned forward, a ripple of gasps spreading. Amos stepped up, his voice rough as the fields he worked. "My son, Jacob, died because he saw what Agrisynth was doing. Those barrels by the dam, the bribes to officials, it's all here. Tracker led us to the proof. If you let that dog go to anyone but Ellie, you're bearing the truth with him." The room buzzed, heads turning, whispers growing louder. Tom rose, his voice humble but clear. "I thought rules were enough, but I was wrong. Caleb left us emails, payments, proof Agrisynth bought half this council. If you ignore this, you're letting them win." Ellie felt the weight of every eye, her heart hammering. Tracker's nose nudged her hand, his warmth pulling her from the edge of fear. She thought of her dad, his laugh by the river, his promise to keep her safe. The council murmured, some faces skeptical, others angry. Roland Carver stood, his suit pristine, his smile a practiced mask. "This is slander," he said, voice smooth as glass. "That dog's a pet, those notes are fiction, and this family is grieving, not thinking straight. Agrisynth is this town's future. Don't throw it away for a fairy tale." The crowd bristled, but Roland's confidence held, his eyes daring anyone to challenge him. Ellie's throat tightened, the silence she'd carried for months pressing down. Tracker shifted, his pole resting on her shoe, his gaze steady, urging her forward. She stood, small and trembling, the journal clutched to her chest. "Dad trusted Tracker," she whispered, her voice cracking the room's tension like a stone through glass. "So do I." The words, her first in public since Caleb's death, hung in the air, raw and true. Tracker barked, sharp and clear, and the crowd fell silent, every heart turning to a girl and her dog, waiting for the world to listen. You can't let a child and a mutt unravel this town's future. Roland Carver snapped, his voice a whip-crack in the packed cedar hollow town hall, his polished facade cracking as Ellie's words hung in the air. The room froze, every eye on 9-year-old Ellie Thompson, standing small but unyielding, her trembling hands clutching her father's journal. Tracker, the beagle at her side, barked again, sharp and defiant, his amber eyes locked on Roland as if he could see through the man's lies. The town hall smelled of polished wood and nervous sweat, sunlight slanting through tall windows, catching dust motes in a golden haze. The crowd, farmers, teachers, the fair's fiddler, leaned forward, their whispers a rising tide. Ellie's voice, raw and new after months of silence, had shattered the room's tension, and now Roland's outburst felt like a confession, raw and desperate. Laura Thompson stood behind Ellie, her face pale but fierce, the tote bag with Caleb's evidence, journal, Biles, USB clutched tight. Tom Bennett, Ellie's stepdad, gripped her shoulder, his mechanic's hands steady for the first time in months. Amos Reed, the grizzled farmer, loomed nearby, his weathered face set like stone, eyes burning with the grief of his lost son, Jacob. Clara Hayes, the councilwoman with a voice like warm honey, leaned forward at the dais, her gray hair catching the light. The council president, Harold Tate, banged his gavel, but the room's pulse refused to slow. Ellie's heart pounded, her throat aching from the effort of speaking. Tracker's nose nudged her hand, his warmth pulling her back from the edge of fear. She thought of her dad, Caleb, his laugh by the river, his promise, trust Tracker, Ellie. He knows. Now, with Roland's eyes boring into her, she felt it. Tracker wasn't just a dog. He was her dad's courage, her voice, the truth Agri-Synth wanted buried. She opened the journal, her fingers finding a sketch of the dam, and pointed. Dad wrote this, she said, louder now, her voice a thin but steady thread. He said Tracker would find the truth. And he did. Laura stepped forward, holding up a vial from the dam cache, its clear liquid glinting like a weapon. Caleb found these chemicals Agri-Synth dumped. Tracker led us to them. This journal, these emails, they prove they bribed officials to cover it up. The crowd gasped, heads turning. Amos's voice cut through, rough as gravel. My Jacob photographed their barrels before he died. They killed him for it, just like they killed Caleb. That dog's the proof they can't buy. Tom, his voice raw, added, we've got payment records, Agri-Synth to half this council. You can't ignore this. Roland's smile was gone, his silver hair disheveled as he jabbed a finger at the dais. This is a farce. Those are fabrications, and that dog's no evidence, just a pet. But his voice cracked, and the crowd sensed it, fear, not confidence. Tracker, as if on cue, padded to Laura's bag, nosing it open. A second vial rolled out, clinking on the floor, and the room erupted in murmurs. Clara Hayes stood, reading from the journal, Follow Tracker. The truth is buried. Caleb trusted this dog, and so should we. She held up the USB, her voice steady. These emails name names, council members, Agri-Synth executives. We can't turn away. The crowd roared, some shouting for justice, others for Roland's arrest. Harold Tate's gavel pounded, but the room was alive, a storm breaking. Roland's face drained of color, his eyes darting to the exit. You'll regret this, he spat, but his words were drowned by the crowd's anger. A farmer yelled, You poisoned our water. A grandmother stood, tears streaming, for Caleb and Jacob. Ellie clung to Tracker, his fur soft under her fingers, his heart beat a drum against her fear. She felt her dad in that moment, his strength woven into Tracker's loyalty, urging her to stand tall. Clara's voice rose above the chaos. We vote now. Should Tracker stay with Ellie as her therapy dog, and should this evidence go to state investigators? Hands shot up, farmers, teachers, even skeptical council members, their faces softening as they looked at Ellie and Tracker. Roland stormed out, his polished shoes clicking, his driver trailing like a shadow. The vote was unanimous. Tracker was Ellie's, and Agri-Synth would face justice. The room didn't cheer. It wept, hugged, clapped softly, a quiet victory heavy with relief. Clara knelt before Ellie, her eyes shining. Your dad would be so proud, sweetheart. Outside, the town square glowed under a late September sun, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves and cut grass. The crowd spilled onto the courthouse lawn, surrounding Ellie and Tracker. A neighbor pressed a note into Ellie's hand, You're braver than us all. Another scratched Tracker's ears, whispering, Good boy. Laura hugged Ellie, tears streaking her face. I see your dad in you, she said. Tom, his eyes wet, put a hand on Ellie's shoulder. You're stronger than me, kid. Amos, his hat pushed back, smiled, a rare, honest thing. Jacob and Caleb are watching, I reckon. Ellie looked at Tracker, his tongue lolling, tail thumping, and whispered, We did it, Dad. His amber eyes sparkled, as if he understood. Days later, Ellie and Tracker visited the Cedar Hollow nursing home, invited by Clara. The halls smelled of antiseptic and old roses, but Tracker's gentle nudges brought light to weary faces. In a quiet room, an elderly woman, her hands frail, smiled as Tracker rested his head in her lap. "What's his name?" she asked. Ellie hesitated, her voice still new, then said softly, "Tracker. He's my best friend." The woman's eyes crinkled. "You're a good pair." Ellie's chest warmed, the silence that had caged her for months loosening, breath by breath. Laura and Tom watched from the doorway, their hands clasped, their family knitting back together. Weeks passed, and Cedar Hollow changed. The local paper ran front-page stories: hero dog, hero girl. State investigators raided AgriSyntha's offices, and Roland vanished, his billboards torn down. Ellie and Tracker became fixtures, visiting the nursing home, walking the fields where Caleb once worked. Laura laughed more, her eyes less shadowed, teaching Ellie to make her dad's cornbread. Tom spent evenings on the porch, showing Ellie how to fix a bike, his awkward smiles growing warmer. Amos stopped by, strumming a battered guitar under the stars, his grief softer now, shared with the family he'd found. The river glinted like polished glass, its surface unbroken except for the occasional ripple of a fish. Tracker, his white and brown coat dappled with more gray now, nosed the grass, his tail wagging softly, as if sensing Caleb's presence in the crisp morning air. Ellie's sneakers crunched on the gravel, her breath puffing in small clouds. She carried her dad's journal, its pages worn soft, a talisman of the fight they'd won 2 years ago against AgriSynth Solutions. But today, the quiet felt fragile, like a pane of ice waiting to crack. Cedar Hollow had changed since that autumn when Ellie and Tracker exposed AgriSyntha's chemical dumping. The town square bustled with new life, farmers markets, a rebuilt library, even a small museum honoring Caleb and Jacob Reed, Amos's son, whose deaths had sparked the town's awakening. Laura Thompson, Ellie's mom, smiled more, her blonde hair streaked with silver, her laughter filling the farmhouse kitchen where she baked cornbread. Tom Bennett, Ellie's stepdad, had traded his mechanic's wrench for a seat on the town council, his once awkward affection now a steady hand on Ellie's shoulder. Amos, grizzled but softer, tended his fields and strummed his guitar on their porch, a quiet uncle to their patchwork family. And Ellie, she spoke now, her voice clear but gentle, shaped by hours whispering to Tracker under the stars. Yet whispers of unease had crept into Cedar Hollow. The state's investigation had gutted AgriSynth, but its shadow lingered. Rumors swirled of a new company, Horizon Agritech, buying up land on the town's outskirts, their sleek billboards promising progress with a smile that felt too much like Roland Carver's. Ellie overheard snippets at the diner, farmers losing leases, wells running cloudy, a council member retiring suddenly after a late-night meeting. At night, she'd lie awake, Tracker curled beside her, wondering if the fight was truly over. Caleb's journal, still on her nightstand, held a final line she couldn't shake: "Keep shining, Ellie. The truth isn't always done with you." It began with a letter, slipped under the farmhouse door on a chilly November morning. Laura found it first, her hands trembling as she read aloud, "Cedar Hollow deserves better. Surrender the dog, or the past comes knocking." No signature, just a typed note on crisp white paper, the words sharp as a blade. Tom's jaw tightened, his counsel instincts kicking in. "This is a scare tactic," he said, but his voice wavered. Amos, sipping coffee at their table, frowned, his eyes distant. Horizons moving fast. They're not just buying land, they're buying silence. Ellie, sitting cross-legged with Tracker, felt her stomach twist. The beagle's ears pricked, his nose sniffing the air as if he could smell the threat. The next day, Ellie and Tracker walked to the library, where Clara Hayes, now mayor, kept an office. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp leaves, the town square lined with pumpkins from the recent harvest fair. Clara's face, lined but kind, darkened as she read the letter. "This isn't random," she said, tapping her desk. Horizon's CEO, Marcus Drayton, was AgriSyntha's silent partner. He's got Roland's playbook, money, charm, and no conscience. She pulled out a file showing permits for a New Horizon processing plant near the dam. They're testing the water again. If Tracker's nose is still sharp, he could prove they're dumping, just like before. Ellie's heart raced. Tracker, lying at her feet, lifted his head, his amber eyes steady. She remembered the dam cache, vials of chemicals, Caleb's proof that had toppled AgriSynth. Could Tracker do it again? He's ready, she said, her voice firm, though fear gnawed at her. Clara nodded. We need evidence, but be careful, Ellie. Drayton's not Roland. He's quieter, smarter, and he doesn't lose. That afternoon, Ellie and Tracker headed to the dam, a backpack slung over her shoulder with a flashlight, gloves, and a small jar for samples. The riverbank was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of pine and mud. Tracker trotted ahead, nose low, tail wagging like a metronome. Ellie followed, her dad's journal tucked inside her jacket, its weight a reminder of his courage. Near a cluster of willows, Tracker stopped, pawing at the earth. Ellie knelt, digging with her hands, her breath hitching as she uncovered a plastic tube, half buried, leaking a faint, acrid smell. Tracker whined, backing away, his nose wrinkling. Inside the tube was a murky liquid, its sheen unnatural under the sun. Ellie sealed it in the jar, her hands shaking, but pride swelled in her chest. Good boy, she whispered, stroking Tracker's ears. He licked her hand, as if saying, we're not done. Back home, the discovery lit a fire. Laura pored over the journal, matching the tube's markings to Caleb's notes on AgriSynth's chemicals. Tom called Clara, who arranged a lab test through a trusted contact in Richmond. Amos arrived, his pickup rattling, and studied the jar with a grim nod. Same stuff Jacob found, he said. Horizons picking up where AgriSynth left off. But the letter's threat loomed, and that night, a black sedan lingered on their road, its headlights piercing the dark. Tracker growled, standing between Ellie and the window, his hackles raised. Laura pulled the curtains, her voice tight. We can't do this alone. The town council meeting, set for the following evening, became their battleground. Clara rallied allies, farmers, teachers, even the diner's cook, whose well had turned sour. The hall filled with familiar faces, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of old wood. Ellie sat in the front row, Tracker at her feet, his warmth grounding her as the crowd buzzed. Laura clutched the lab report, confirming the tube's contents as a banned pesticide linked to Horizon's new plant. Tom, now a councilman, stood beside her, his broad shoulders squared. Amos, hat in hand, watched the door as if expecting trouble. Clara opened the meeting, her voice steady. We're here to address Horizon Agritech's permits and new evidence of environmental harm. Mrs. Thompson, please. Laura rose, holding the lab report. 2 years ago, my husband, Caleb, proved AgriSynth poisoned our water. Now Horizon's doing the same. This pesticide, found by the dam, matches their production. Tracker, Caleb's dog, led us to it. She gestured to Ellie, who stood, her knees trembling but her voice clear. Dad trusted Tracker to find the truth. He's doing it again, for all of us. Tracker sat up, his bark echoing, a clarion call that silenced the room. Amos spoke next, his voice raw. My Jacob died for this fight. Horizon's not new, they're AgriSynth with a different name. If you approve their plant, you're signing our town's death warrant. Tom held up the journal, his voice steady. Caleb's notes, these emails, they show Horizon's bribes to council members. We can't let history repeat. The crowd roared, some cheering, others shouting at the council's newer members, whose faces paled. Marcus Drayton stood, his tailored suit and calm smile a stark contrast to Roland's flesh. This is a misunderstanding, he said, voice smooth as silk. Horizon is committed to Cedar Hollow's growth. These claims are unproven, and that dog is no scientist. He gestured to Tracker, dismissing him with a flick of his hand. Ellie's blood boiled, but Tracker's nose nudged her, his eyes urging her to stay strong. She pulled the jar from her bag, holding it high. Tracker found this. It's poison, and it's yours. The crowd gasped, leaning forward, their anger a living thing. Clara read the lab report aloud, her voice cutting through Drayton's charm. This pesticide is illegal, traced to Horizon's supply chain. We have emails, permits, and a pattern of corruption. A farmer stood, fist raised. Our wells are dying. A mother cried, my kids can't drink the water. The room surged, a wave of fury and hope. Drayton's smile faltered, his eyes darting to a man in a dark jacket by the exit. His enforcer, Ellie realized, her stomach twisting. Harold Tate, the council president, called for order, his gavel pounding. We'll vote on Horizon's permits and an investigation. But Drayton leaned forward, voice low, venomous. You're making enemies you can't afford. Ellie felt a chill, but Tracker pressed against her, his warmth a shield. Clara's eyes blazed. Vote now or we take this to the state ourselves. Hands rose, nearly every council member, swayed by the crowd's fire and Tracker's proof. The permits were denied, and Horizon faced a full investigation. The room erupted, not in cheers, but in tears, hugs, a shared breath of relief. Drayton slipped out, his enforcer trailing, but his parting glance at Ellie was a promise of trouble. Outside, the square glowed under a harvest moon, the air sharp with frost and possibility. The crowd surrounded Ellie and Tracker, offering notes, handshakes, scratches for the beagle's ears. You're our light, a grandmother said, pressing a quilt square into Ellie's hand. Laura hugged her, whispering, Caleb's so proud. Tom knelt, his eyes soft. You're braver than I'll ever be, kid. Amos, his smile weary but real, tipped his hat. You and Tracker, you're family now. Ellie stroked Tracker's fur, his tail thumping, and whispered, we're not alone. Boy. His amber eyes sparkled, as if Caleb were watching, nodding. Weeks later, Ellie and Tracker walked the nursing home's halls, where Tracker's gentle nudges brought smiles to weary faces. In a sunlit room, a veteran named Mr. Ellis, his hands gnarled, laughed as Tracker flopped beside him. What's he like? He asked. Ellie sat, her voice steady now. He's my hero. He finds what's hidden. Mr. Ellis nodded, eyes misty. You're a team, like me and my old hound. Ellie's heart swelled, the silence she'd once carried now a distant memory. Cedar Hollow healed, but scars remained. Horizon's plant was shuttered, Drayton indicted, but whispers of new threats lingered, land deals, shadowed meetings. Laura taught Ellie to plant seeds in their garden, her hands steady beside her daughter's. Tom built a bench by the dam, carving Caleb's name into the wood. Amos sang ballads on their porch, his guitar weaving stories of loss and hope. Ellie, Tracker at her side, spoke at schools, her voice carrying Caleb's fight to New Year's. One spring morning, Ellie stood by the river, wildflowers blooming where the dam cache had been. Tracker chased a butterfly, his bark bright, his graying muzzle catching the sun. Ellie opened the journal, its final page soft under her fingers. Keep shining, Ellie. She smiled, tears falling, and whispered, we will, Dad. Tracker bounded back, nosing her hand, his tail a blur. Laura and Tom watched, arms linked, while Amos's pickup idled nearby, a quiet promise of protection. A montage bloomed Ellie and Tracker racing through fields, their laughter free, sharing cornbread with neighbors, the farmhouse warm, speaking at a town meeting, Tracker's bark punctuating her words, Amos teaching her to strum a chord, his eyes proud. The journal rested on Ellie's nightstand, its truth alive in her voice, her dog, her town. Cedar Hollow wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, a place where love and courage outshone any shadow. If you pass through, look for the girl with the bright eyes and the beagle who never leaves her side. They're listening, always, for the truth that keeps them shining. The summer of 2027 draped Cedar Hollow in a golden haze, the air heavy with the scent of blooming clover and sun-warmed earth. Ellie Thompson, now 13, stood on the porch of the family farmhouse, her sneakers dusted with pollen from the fields where she'd run with Tracker, the beagle whose loyalty had stitched her heart back together. The old dog, his muzzle nearly white, lay at her feet, his amber eyes half-closed but alert, catching the hum of crickets in the dusk. The town had grown quieter since their victories over AgriSynth and Horizon Agritech, its streets lined with new flower beds and a community garden where Caleb's name was carved into a wooden sign. Yet as Ellie gazed at the horizon, where the Blue Ridge Mountains loomed like silent sentinels, she felt a restlessness, a whisper that the peace they'd fought for might not last. 2 years had passed since Ellie and Tracker uncovered Horizon's pesticide dumping, a triumph that had solidified Cedar Hollow's spirit. Laura Thompson, Ellie's mom, now ran a co-op bakery, her cornbread a town staple, her laughter a melody in their home. Tom Bennett, Ellie's stepdad, balanced his council duties with teaching Ellie to rebuild engines, their evenings filled with grease-stained hands and shared smiles. Amos Reed, the farmer whose grief for his son Jacob had fueled their fight, had become a fixture at their table, his guitar strumming tales of resilience under the stars. Clara Hayes, Cedar Hollow's mayor, kept the town's heart beating, her office a hub of hope. And Ellie, her voice, once silenced by her father's death, now carried stories told to kids at the library or elders at the nursing home, always with Tracker at her side. But shadows had begun to creep back. A new developer, Ballyrise Properties, had arrived, their glossy brochures promising a modern Cedar Hollow with condos and a mall. Their representative, Sylvia Langston, a sharp-eyed woman with a politician's smile, charmed the council with talk of jobs and growth. Yet, farmers reported strange soil patches, barren, sour-smelling near Ballyrise survey sites. At the diner, old-timers muttered about missing livestock and unfamiliar trucks on back roads. Ellie, flipping through Caleb's journal, found a note in his tight scroll, "When the land speaks, listen. It never lies." She wondered if Tracker, whose nose had found truth before, could hear it again. The trouble crystallized on a humid July morning when a flyer appeared on the farmhouse door, community meeting, Save Cedar Hollow's future. Ballyrise seeks partnership. Laura frowned, her hands flour-dusted from kneading dough. "They're moving fast," she said, passing the flyer to Tom. He scanned it, his jaw tight. "This isn't a partnership, it's a takeover." Amos, sipping coffee, tapped the table. "Langston's got money, but she's hiding something. I've seen her people near the old quarry, digging at night." Ellie, stroking Tracker's ears, felt a chill. The beagle's nose twitched, as if catching a scent on the breeze, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet urgency. Clara called a family meeting that evening, her office cluttered with maps and soil reports. The air smelled of ink and old books, a single bulb casting long shadows. "Ballyrise isn't just building," she said, spreading a survey map. "They're eyeing the quarry for waste storage, industrial, maybe toxic. The soil samples are off, but we need hard proof." She looked at Ellie, her eyes softening. Tracker's nose found AgriSynth's secrets, then Horizon's. "Think you've got one more fight in him." Ellie nodded, her heart racing. Tracker, sprawled by her chair, thumped his tail, as if answering. "He's ready," she said, her voice steady, though fear flickered beneath it. The next dawn, Ellie and Tracker set out for the quarry, a mile past the dam, where cedar trees gave way to jagged stone. The air was thick with dust and the faint hum of distant machinery. Ellie carried a backpack with a jar, gloves, and Caleb's journal, its weight a tether to her dad's courage. Tracker trotted ahead, his graying muzzle low, nose sifting the earth. Near a rusted gate, he stopped, pawing at a patch of blackened soil. Ellie knelt, her hands digging, unearthing a metal canister, its lid stamped with a Ballyrise logo. A sharp chemical smell stung her nose and Tracker whined, backing away. She sealed the canister's contents, a viscous, greenish sludge, in her jar, her pulse pounding. "You did it, boy," she whispered, ruffling his ears. Tracker licked her hand, his eyes bright, a spark of their old fire. Back home, the find set the family ablaze. Laura matched the canister's markings to Caleb's notes on industrial solvents, banned for their toxicity. Tom contacted a lab in Richmond, his council connections speeding the analysis. Amos studied the jar, his face grim. "This is what killed my crops in 24, he said. "They're poisoning the land again." Clara, arriving with a soil expert's report, confirmed the sludge's danger. "If Valley Rise buries this in the quarry, our water's done," she said. But a new threat emerged. A Valley Rise lawyer had filed to seize Tracker, claiming he was interfering with development and citing his age as a public health risk. The notice, delivered that afternoon, shook Ellie to her core. "They can't take him," she said, her voice breaking, clutching Tracker's fur. His warmth steadied her, but fear gnawed deep. The community meeting, held in the town hall 3 days later, was a powder keg. The room buzzed with Cedar Hollow's soul, farmers, shopkeepers, kids with homemade signs reading "Save Tracker." The air smelled of sweat and cedar polish, moonlight filtering through high windows. Ellie sat in the front row, Tracker's head on her knee, his heartbeat a drum against her fear. Laura clutched the lab report. Tom held Caleb's journal, and Amos stood like a sentinel, his eyes scanning the crowd. Clara, at the dais, faced Sylvia Langston, whose tailored blazer and cool smile masked a predator's edge. Clara opened, her voice firm. "Valley Rise quarry plan threatens our land and water. We have evidence of toxic dumping, and we demand a halt." Laura stood, holding the jar. "This sludge, found by Tracker, is a banned solvent traced to Valley Rise. My husband, Caleb, died fighting this kind of poison. We won't let it happen again." Amos's voice rumbled, raw with grief. "My Jacob saw their kind of progress. It cost him his life. That dog's our proof. Don't you dare take him." Tom, his voice steady, read from the journal. Caleb warned of greed in the soil. "These emails show Valley Rise bribes to silence inspectors." The crowd roared, signs waving, voices shouting, "Protect our home." Ellie felt the room's pulse, her fear giving way to fire. She stood, Tracker rising with her, and held up the canister. "Tracker found this because he listens to the land, like Dad did," she said, her voice ringing clear, shaped by years of speaking with her dog. "He's not just mine, he's ours." Tracker barked, sharp and true, and the hall erupted, a wave of defiance crashing over Sylvia's calm. Langston rose, her smile tight. "This is speculation," she said, voice smooth but strained. "That dog's old, unreliable. Our project is legal, approved. We're offering jobs, prosperity." She held up the seizure notice, her eyes locking on Ellie's. "Tracker's a liability. For safety, he should be removed." The crowd booed, a farmer shouting, "You're the threat." A mother stood, tears streaming, "Leave her dog alone." Ellie's heart pounded, but Tracker's warmth pressed against her, his eyes urging her to fight. Clara's voice cut through, fierce. "We vote now, halt Valley Rise permits, investigate their waste, and protect Tracker as a community asset." Sylvia leaned forward, her voice low, venomous. "You'll lose more than you know." But the crowd's will was iron. Hands rose, every council member, swayed by the jar, the journal, and Tracker's bark. The permits were revoked, an investigation launched, and Tracker was declared untouchable, a therapy dog for Cedar Hollow's heart. The room didn't cheer, it wept, hugged, sang a hymn, the air thick with hope. Sylvia slipped out, her lawyer trailing, but her glance at Ellie was a shadow, a warning. Outside, the square shimmered under stars, the air crisp with the scent of cedar and earth. The crowd surrounded Ellie and Tracker, offering quilts, notes, scratches for the beagle's ears. "You're our voice," a librarian said, pressing a book into Ellie's hands. Laura smiled, tears falling, "Caleb's in every step you take." Tom hugged her, whispering, "You're unstoppable, kid." Amos, his eyes soft, said, "You and Tracker, you're the valley's light." Ellie knelt, burying her face in Tracker's fur, whispering, "We're home, boy." His tail thumped, his amber eyes bright, as if Caleb were nodding, proud. Months later, Ellie and Tracker walked the community center, where Tracker's visits sparked laughter from kids and stories from elders. In a quiet room, a girl named Sarah, shy and silent, smiled as Tracker nudged her hand. "What's he like?" she asked. Ellie sat beside her, voice warm. "He's my family. He finds what's true." Sarah nodded, her own words stirring, and Ellie felt her dad's legacy grow, a light passed on. Cedar Hollow thrived, its fields green, its water clean. Valley Rise collapsed, Sylvia indicted, but whispers of new developers lingered, a reminder of vigilance. Laura planted roses with Ellie, their hands in the soil. Tom carved a new park bench, Tracker's name etched beside Caleb's. Amos sang ballads, his voice weaving hope into the dusk. Ellie, Tracker at her side, spoke at town halls, her voice a beacon, her dog a guide. One summer evening, Ellie stood by the quarry, now a meadow, wildflowers swaying where poison once hid. Tracker lay beside her, his breathing slow, his gray muzzle soft under her hand. She opened the journal, its final page glowing. "Keep shining, Ellie." "We are, Dad," she said, tears falling, her voice a song. Tracker whined, happy, his tail a gentle wave. Laura and Tom watched, arms linked, while Amos's guitar drifted from the farmhouse, a melody of home. A montage unfolded, Ellie and Tracker leading kids through fields, their joy boundless, baking with Laura, flour dusting their smiles, fixing a tractor with Tom, their laughter loud, Amos teaching her a chord, his eyes proud. The journal rested on Ellie's nightstand, its truth alive in her heart, her dog, her town. Cedar Hollow was theirs, a valley where love outshone every shadow. If you visit, find the girl with the bright eyes and the old beagle, standing where the land speaks, listening for truth, shining always. The autumn of 2028 wrapped Cedar Hollow in a quilt of crimson and gold. The maples along Main Street shedding leaves that danced like embers in the crisp breeze. Ellie Thompson, now 14, leaned against the fence of the community garden, her auburn hair catching the late afternoon sun. Tracker, the beagle who'd been her anchor through years of loss and triumph, lay beside her, his white muzzle pressed to the grass, his amber eyes tracking a butterfly with a gentleness that belied his age. The garden, with its rows of pumpkins and sunflowers, bore a wooden sign etched with her father's name, Caleb Thompson, a quiet tribute to the man whose fight for clean water had shaped their town. The air smelled of loamy soil and apple pie from the nearby bakery, but beneath the warmth, Ellie sensed a tremor, a whisper in the wind that hinted at trouble brewing. Cedar Hollow had flourished since Ellie and Tracker thwarted Valley Rise Properties' toxic dumping scheme. The town square buzzed with festivals, the library hosted storytelling nights, and the dam, once a battleground, now sparkled under community cleanups. Laura Thompson, Ellie's mom, ran her co-op bakery with a steady hand, her cornbread a symbol of home, her smile a beacon in their farmhouse kitchen. Tom Bennett, Ellie's stepdad, balanced council duties with mentoring local teens, his grease-stained hands now as skilled at building trust as engines. Amos Reed, the farmer whose son Jacob had died for the truth, was a grandfatherly presence, his guitar weaving ballads that echoed across their porch. Clara Hayes, Cedar Hollow's mayor, guarded the town's soul, her office a haven of wisdom. Ellie, her voice strong after years of silence, shared Caleb's stories with school kids and elders, always with Tracker's soft snores punctuating her words. Yet a new unease had settled over the valley. A tech startup, Windwhisper Innovations, had leased land near the old Windmill Hill, promising green energy with sleek turbines and jobs. Their CEO, Evelyn Warwick, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a voice like honeyed steel, spoke at town halls, her promises laced with charm. But farmers noticed dying crops near the windmill, and the creek feeding their fields ran sluggish, its water tinged with an oily sheen. At the diner, old-timers swapped tales of strange lights on the hill at night, and Ellie overheard a council aide mention missing soil reports. Flipping through Caleb's journal, now dog-eared and soft, she found a line that chilled her. The wind carries secrets. Trust the land to speak. Tracker's nose, still sharp despite his slowing gait, seemed to twitch when she read it aloud, as if he heard the same call. The trouble took shape on a foggy October morning when a package arrived at the farmhouse, wrapped in brown paper with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, a blurry shot of Tracker by the dam, with a typed note, "Some truths are better buried." "Let the dog go." Laura's hands shook as she set it down, her flour-dusted apron trembling. "This isn't a prank," she said, her voice low. Tom studied the photo, his jaw tight. Windwhispers playing dirty. They know Tracker's history. Amos, nursing a mug of coffee, frowned. Warwick's got connections, state officials, maybe higher. They're not just building turbines. Ellie, stroking Tracker's graying ears, felt a knot in her chest. The beagle's eyes met hers, steady and warm, a reminder of their shared battles. "They can't have you," she whispered, her voice fierce. Clara summoned them to her office that evening, the air thick with the scent of old books and coffee. Maps of Windmill Hill covered her desk, marked with red X's where crops had failed. "Windwhisper's turbines are a front," she said, her gray hair catching the lamplight. "They're drilling, maybe for rare minerals, maybe waste disposal. The creek's contaminated, but we need proof." She looked at Ellie, her eyes softening. "Tracker's nose has never failed us." One more time. Ellie nodded, her heart pounding. Tracker, curled by her feet, thumped his tail, his aging frame still eager. "He's got it in him," she said, though worry gnawed at her. Tracker was slower now, his breaths heavier after long walks. The next dawn, Ellie and Tracker trekked to Windmill Hill, where the old mill's blades creaked in the mist. The air smelled of damp stone and something sharp, metallic. Ellie carried a backpack with a jar, gloves, and Caleb's journal, its weight a tether to her dad's courage. Tracker shuffled ahead, his gray muzzle low, nose sifting the earth. Near a chain-link fence marked Windwhisper property, he stopped, pawing at a patch of cracked soil. Ellie dug, her hands unearthing a small metal vial, its surface etched with a serial number and a faint, chemical odor. Tracker whined, his ears flattening, and backed away. Ellie sealed the vial's contents, a dark, oily liquid, in her jar, her pulse racing. "You're still the best," she whispered, ruffling his fur. Tracker's tail wagged, but his eyes held a weariness that tugged at her heart. Back home, the vial sparked a firestorm. Laura matched its markings to Caleb's notes on heavy metal runoff, a byproduct of illegal drilling. Tom sent the sample to a Richmond lab, his council contacts ensuring a rush analysis. Amos studied the vial, his face grim. "This is what poisoned my herd in 22, he said. "They're killing the valley." Clara arrived with a geologist's report confirming the creek's contamination. "If Windwhisper's drilling, the aquifer's at risk," she said. But a new threat loomed. A Windwhisper lawyer filed a motion to retire Tracker, citing his age and public safety concerns, demanding he be kennelled in Richmond. The notice, delivered that afternoon, hit Ellie like a punch. "They won't take you," she said, hugging Tracker tight, his warmth easing her panic, but not her fear. The town hall meeting, set for the following evening, was a crucible. The room brimmed with Cedar Hollow's spirit, Farmers with calloused hands, teachers with notebooks, kids waving signs. Tracker stays. The air smelled of cedar polish and nervous hope, moonlight filtering through high windows. Ellie sat in the front row, Tracker's head on her knee, his heartbeat a steady drum. Laura clutched the lab report. Tom held the journal, and Amos stood like a weathered oak, his eyes sharp. Clara, at the dais, faced Evelyn Warwick, whose silk scarf and calm smile masked a shark's intent. Clara opened, her voice ringing. Wind Whisper's drilling threatens our water, our land, our future. We have evidence, and we demand action. Laura stood, holding the vial. This runoff, found by Tracker, is toxic, linked to Wind Whisper's operations. My husband, Caleb, died to protect this valley. We won't let it fall. Amos's voice growled, heavy with grief. My Jacob saw this greed. It cost him everything. That dog's our truth. Don't you dare cage him. Tom, his voice firm, read from the journal. Caleb warned of poison in the earth. These emails show Wind Whisper's payoffs to bypass inspections. The crowd surged, signs waving, voices shouting, "Save our valley." Ellie felt the room's fire, her fear burning away. She stood, Tracker rising with her, and held up the vial. Tracker found this because he hears what we can't. Like Dad did, she said, her voice clear, honed by years of storytelling with her dog. He's not just mine, he's Cedar Hollow's. Tracker barked, his aging voice still sharp, and the hall roared, a tide of defiance crashing over Warwick's poise. Warwick rose, her smile tight. This is conjecture, she said, voice smooth but strained. That dog's too old for this. Our turbines are green, legal. We're bringing prosperity. She held up the kennel motion, her eyes piercing Ellie's. Tracker's a risk. For the town's sake, he should be retired. The crowd booed, a farmer yelling, "You're the poison." A mother stood, tears falling, leave her dog alone. Ellie's heart raced, but Tracker's warmth anchored her, his eyes urging her to stand tall. Clara's voice sliced through, fierce. We vote now, halt Wind Whisper's drilling, launch an investigation, and protect Tracker as our community's heart. Warwick leaned forward, her voice low, venomous. You'll regret this choice, but the crowds will with steel. Hands rose, every council member, moved by the vial, the journal, and Tracker's bark. The drilling was stopped, an investigation greenlit, and Tracker was declared a protected therapy dog, untouchable. The room didn't cheer, it sang, wept, embraced, the air thick with hope. Warwick slipped out, her lawyer trailing, but her glance at Ellie was a shadow, a vow of vengeance. Outside, the square glowed under a harvest moon, the air sharp with frost and cedar. The crowd enveloped Ellie and Tracker, offering hugs, notes, scratches for the beagle's ears. You're our strength, a teacher said, pressing a poem into Ellie's hands. Laura smiled, tears streaming. Caleb's in your fire, Ellie. Tom hugged her, whispering, You're our hero, kid. Amos, his eyes soft, said, You and Tracker, you're the valley song. Ellie knelt, burying her face in Tracker's fur, whispering, We're safe, boy. His tail thunked, his amber eyes warm, as if Caleb were smiling, proud. Months later, Ellie and Tracker roamed the community center, where Tracker's visits sparked joy in young and old. In a sunlit room, a boy named Tim, mute sense of fire, grinned as Tracker nudged his hand. What's he like? He signed. Ellie sat beside him, voice warm. He's my truth. He finds what's real. Tim nodded, his fingers forming a word, and Ellie felt Caleb's legacy bloom, a light shared. Cedar Hollow thrived, its creek clear, its fields green. Wind Whisper folded, Warwick indicted, but whispers of new ventures lingered, a call to vigilance. Laura baked with Ellie, their laughter filling the kitchen. Tom built a swing by the windmill, Tracker's name carved beside Caleb's. Amos sang ballads, his voice a thread of hope. Ellie, Tracker at her side, spoke at schools, her voice a beacon, her dog a guide. One autumn dusk, Ellie stood by the windmill, now a meadow, asters swaying where poison once hid. Tracker lay beside her, his breath slow, his white muzzle soft under her hand. She opened the journal, its final page glowing. "Keep shining, Ellie." "Always, Dad," she said, tears falling, her voice a hymn. Tracker whined, happy, his tail a gentle wave. Laura and Tom watched, arms linked, while Amos's guitar drifted from the farmhouse, a melody of home. A montage unfolded, Ellie and Tracker leading kids through meadows, their joy free, baking with Laura, Flower dusting their smiles, fixing a bike with Tom, their laughter bright, Amos teaching her a chord, his eyes proud. The journal rested on Ellie's nightstand, its truth alive in her heart, her dog, her town. Cedar Hollow was theirs, a valley where love outshone every whisper. If you visit, find the girl with the bright eyes and the old beagle, standing where the wind speaks, listening for truth, shining forever. The spring of 2024 breathed renewal into Cedar Hollow, its meadows bursting with wildflowers that swayed like a painter's dream under a long, lazy sun. Ellie Thompson, now 16, stood at the edge of the community garden, her father's journal tucked under her arm, its pages soft as a well-worn prayer. Tracker, the beagle who'd carried her through grief and triumph, lay sprawled in the grass, his white muzzle catching the light, his amber eyes half closed but ever watchful. The garden's sunflowers nodded in the breeze, their sign, in memory of Caleb Thompson, a quiet anchor in a town that had fought and won against greed. The air smelled of fresh earth and honeysuckle, but beneath the sweetness, Ellie felt a prickle, like static before a storm, whispering that Cedar Hollow's peace was fragile. The town had blossomed since Ellie and Tracker defeated Wind Whisper Innovations, its streets alive with summer fairs and a new school wing funded by community grants. Laura Thompson, Ellie's mom, ran her bakery with joy, her cornbread a town treasure, her laughter a melody in their farmhouse. Tom Bennett, Ellie's stepdad, led the council with a steady hand, teaching Ellie to weld in their garage, their bond forged in shared silences and smiles. Amos Reed, the farmer whose son Jacob died for truth, was a constant presence, his guitar strumming hope under starlit skies. Clara Hayes, Cedar Hollow's mayor, nurtured the town's spirit, her office a beacon of resolve. Ellie, her voice a river after years of silence, told Caleb's stories at festivals, Tracker's soft snores her rhythm, his aging frame a testament to their shared battles. Yet a new shadow loomed. A mining conglomerate, Embercore Resources, had descended, their drones buzzing over the valley, their CEO, Victor Kane, a man with a hawk's gaze and a voice like polished stone, promising sustainable wealth through lithium extraction. His billboards dotted the highways, but farmers reported tremors, small quakes rattling barns, and springs drying up near Embercore's test sites. At the diner, whispers spoke of pressured land sales and a council member's sudden wealth. Ellie, leafing through Caleb's journal, found a scrawled warning: "The earth holds its secrets tight. Break it and it fights back." Tracker's nose twitched when she read it, his aging body stirring, as if the land's pulse called to him still. Trouble ignited on a sultry June morning when a fire broke out in the community garden, its flames licking the sunflowers, the Caleb sign scorched but standing. Ellie, helping Laura at the bakery, saw the smoke and ran, Tracker hobbling behind, his breaths labored but determined. The fire was doused, but a note was found in the ashes: "Cedar Hollow burns if the dog digs." Laura's face paled, her hands trembling as she held it. Tom, arriving with firefighters, cursed under his breath. "Embercore's sending a message," he said, his voice tight. Amos, inspecting the charred soil, growled, "Kane's got the council spooked. They're eyeing the quarry again." Ellie knelt beside Tracker, her heart racing. The beagle's eyes met hers, weary but fierce, a spark of their old fire. "We're not done. boy, she whispered, her voice a vow. Clara called an emergency meeting at her office, the air thick with smoke's aftertaste and old maps. Embercore's mining isn't sustainable, she said, her gray hair catching the lamplight. Their test drills are fracturing the aquifer, causing quakes. The fire's a warning, they know Tracker's knows. She spread a seismic report, red lines snaking near the quarry. We need proof of their damage, fast. Ellie's stomach nodded, Tracker's age weighing on her. He was slower, his joints stiff. But his tail thumped, his eyes urging her forward. He can do it, she said, her voice steady, though fear for him gnawed deep. The next dawn, Ellie and Tracker ventured to the quarry, now a maze of Embercore equipment, its air sharp with diesel and dust. Ellie carried a backpack with a jar, gloves, and Caleb's journal, its weight her dad's hand on her shoulder. Tracker shuffled ahead, his gray muzzle low, nose sifting the cracked earth. Near a drilling rig, he stopped, pawing at a fissure leaking a dark, metallic sludge. Ellie dug, unearthing a sealed canister, its Embercore logo glinting, its contents reeking of chemicals. Tracker whined, his aging frame trembling, and backed away. Ellie sealed the sludge in her jar, her pulse thundering. "You're still my hero," she whispered, stroking his ears. Tracker's tail wagged, but his breaths came heavy, a reminder of time's toll. Back home, the canister lit a fuse. Laura matched its markings to Caleb's notes on lithium runoff, toxic to water and soil. Tom sent the sample to a Richmond lab, his counsel clout rushing the results. Amos studied the jar, his face etched with rage. "This is what killed my fields in 19, he said. "They're breaking the valley." Clara arrived with a hydrologist's report confirming the aquifer's fractures. "If Embercore mines, our water's gone," she said. But a new threat emerged. Embercore filed to seize Tracker, claiming he was a trespass hazard and demanding his relocation to a state facility. The notice, delivered that afternoon, crushed Ellie. "They won't take you," she said, hugging Tracker, his warmth easing her terror, but not her resolve. The town hall meeting, set for the next evening, was a crucible of fury and hope. The room brimmed with Cedar Hollow's heart, farmers, bakers, kids with signs, "Tracker saves us." The air smelled of cedar polish and defiance, starlight filtering through high windows. Ellie sat in the front row, Tracker's head on her knee, his aging heartbeat her anchor. Laura clutched the lab report, Tom held the journal, and Amos stood like a weathered cliff, his eyes blazing. Clara, at the dais, faced Victor Kane, whose tailored suit and cold smile masked a predator's hunger. Clara opened, her voice a clarion. "Embercore's mining fractures our aquifer, poisons our land. We have proof, and we demand a stop." Laura stood, holding the canister. "This runoff, found by Tracker, is toxic, tied to Embercore's drills. My husband, Caleb, died to save this valley. We won't lose it now." Amos's voice thundered, raw with grief. "My Jacob fell to their greed. That dog's our truth, don't you cage him." Tom, his voice steel, read from the journal. Caleb warned of broken earth. These emails prove Embercore's bribes to hide the quakes. The crowd erupted, signs waving, voices roaring, "Save our valley." Ellie felt the room's pulse, her fear burning into fire. She stood, Tracker struggling to rise, his aging legs unsteady but his spirit fierce. She held up the canister, her voice ringing, shaped by years with her dog. "Tracker found this because he hears the earth like Dad did. He's not just mine, he's ours." Tracker barked, his voice cracked but defiant, and the hall surged, a tidal wave of courage drowning Kane's calm. Kane rose, his smile a knife. "This is fantasy," he said, voice smooth but fraying. "That dog's frail, useless. Our mining is legal, vital. We're your future." He held up the seizure motion, his eyes piercing Ellie's. "Tracker's a danger. He belongs in a kennel, for safety." The crowd roared, a farmer shouting, "You're the danger." A mother wept, "Leave her dog." Ellie's heart pounded, but Tracker's warmth steadied her, his eyes urging her to fight. Clara's voice slashed through, fierce. "We vote now, halt Embercore's mining, launch an investigation, protect Tracker as our soul." Kane leaned forward, his voice venom. "You'll pay for this defiance." But the crowd's will was iron. Hands rose, every council member, moved by the canister, the journal, Tracker's bark. The mining was stopped, an investigation launched, and Tracker was declared a protected therapy dog, untouchable. The room sang, wept, embraced, the air thick with hope. Kane slipped out, his aide trailing, but his glance at Ellie was a spark, a promise of fire. Outside, the square glowed under a crescent moon, the air sharp with cedar and earth. The crowd enveloped Ellie and Tracker, offering quilts, notes, scratches for the beagle's ears. "You're our flame," a librarian said, pressing a storybook into Ellie's hands. Laura smiled, tears falling. "Caleb's in your courage, Ellie." Tom hugged her, whispering, "You're unstoppable, kid." Amos, his eyes soft, said, "You and Tracker, you're the valley's heartbeat." Ellie knelt, burying her face in Tracker's fur, whispering, "We're home, boy." His tail thunked, his amber eyes warm, as if Caleb were cheering, proud. Months later, Ellie and Tracker roamed the community center, where Tracker's visits sparked joy in young and old. In a sunlit room, a girl named Lily, silent since a storm, smiled as Tracker nudged her hand. "What's he like?" she whispered. Ellie sat beside her, voice warm. "He's my truth. He finds what's real." Lily nodded, her own words stirring, and Ellie felt Caleb's legacy glow, a flame passed on. Cedar Hollow thrived, its springs clear, its fields lush. Embercore collapsed, Kane indicted, but whispers of new threats lingered, a call to vigilance. Laura baked with Ellie, their laughter filling the kitchen. Tom built a gazebo by the quarry, Tracker's name carved beside Caleb's. Amos sang ballads, his voice a thread of hope. Ellie, Tracker at her side, spoke at fairs, her voice a beacon, her dog a guide. One spring dusk, Ellie stood by the windmill meadow, asters blooming where poison once hid. Tracker lay beside her, his breath slow, his white muzzle soft under her hand. She opened the journal, its final page shining. "Keep shining, Ellie." "Forever, Dad," she said, tears falling, her voice a song. Tracker whined, happy, his tail a gentle wave. Laura and Tom watched, arms linked, while Amos's guitar drifted from the farmhouse, a melody of home. A montage unfolded, Ellie and Tracker leading kids through meadows, their joy boundless, baking with Laura, flour dusting their smiles, welding with Tom, their laughter bright, Amos teaching her a chord, his eyes proud. The journal rested on Ellie's nightstand, its truth alive in her heart, her dog, her town. Cedar Hollow was theirs, a valley where love burned brighter than any flame. If you visit, find the girl with the bright eyes and the old beagle, standing where the earth sings, listening for truth, shining always.